The emergency meeting invitation appeared on my screen at 2 p.m. on a Thursday. Subject line, urgent, production crisis all hands. I stared at it for a long moment, coffee cold in my hand, and felt nothing but a strange, hollow calm. 3 days. It had taken exactly 3 days. Let me back up. My name is Maria Johnson, and until very recently, I was the person who kept Twilight Technologies running. Not on paper, I was a senior operations coordinator. But in practice? I was the translator between engineering and sales, the firefighter for client escalations, the only person who understood our legacy manufacturing systems, and the informal mentor to half the junior staff. 6 years I'd done this. 6 years of arriving early, staying late, answering messages at midnight, fixing problems that weren't technically mine to fix. I never complained. I thought it meant something, that visibility, that indispensability. I thought eventually someone would notice and it would matter. The building itself reflected the company's priorities. Executive offices occupied the entire west side of the 5th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. Our operations pod sat in the interior, fluorescent lit and cramped, surrounded by filing cabinets nobody had digitized because that wasn't strategic work. My desk accumulated layers like geological strata, current project folders, reference binders I created myself, sticky notes reminding me which executives preferred which communication styles, and a growing collection of empty coffee cups that multiplied during crisis weeks. I'd stopped decorating my workspace 3 years ago. No family photos, no plants, no personal touches. It felt temporary even when it wasn't, like I was always waiting for the role to finally match the reality of what I did. The meeting that changed everything happened on a Monday morning. Our COO, Diane Sutherland, called me into her office. She was standing by the window, backlit and polished, scrolling through her tablet with the kind of casual authority that comes from never doubting your own decisions. Her office smelled like expensive leather and the particular brand of confidence that came from an Ivy League MBA and a decade of never being questioned. "Maria, we're restructuring the quarterly operations review process," she said without looking up. "I'm moving you off the leadership track for that initiative." I blinked. I'd been running those reviews for 3 years. I know. She finally glanced at me, something like amusement flickering across her face. "But frankly, we need someone more decisive. Someone who can command the room." She tilted her head toward the door. "I'm bringing in Kyle Brenner from the consulting team. He's more assertive. You understand. Kyle Brenner. The nephew of our board chair, Charles Brenner. 6 months at the company. Confident, yes. Knowledgeable? Barely. He'd spent most of his tenure producing PowerPoint decks with consulting jargon and attending networking lunches. I'd watched him nod sagely in meetings about topics he clearly didn't understand, then corner me afterward asking for quick clarifications that took 45 minutes to explain. "I see," I said quietly. "Good. I knew you'd be professional about this." She turned back to her tablet, dismissing me with her posture. "You'll still support him, of course. Transitional knowledge transfer and all that. Make sure he has everything he needs." Something cracked inside me in that moment. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a clean, quiet break, like ice giving way underfoot. I'd heard those words before: support, transfer, professional. They were the vocabulary of exploitation dressed up as opportunity. I stood there for another 3 seconds, nodded once, and left her office. Walking back to my desk felt different. The familiar hallway, beige walls, corporate motivational posters about synergy and innovation, suddenly looked like what it was: stage dressing for a system that consumed people's expertise and called it teamwork. I didn't slam doors. I didn't fire off angry emails. I didn't quit in a blaze of glory. Instead, I went back to my desk, opened my job description, the actual, official one from HR, and read it carefully for the first time in years. Senior Operations Coordinator. Responsibilities: coordinate cross-functional meetings, maintain operational documentation, support leadership initiatives. Support. Coordinate. Maintain. Nothing about crisis management. Nothing about system architecture. Nothing about working 60-hour weeks to compensate for institutional knowledge gaps. Nothing about being the human buffer between dysfunctional departments. I pulled up my calendar and started declining everything that wasn't explicitly in my job description. The weekly emergency check-ins with sales about client concerns? Declined. The informal troubleshooting sessions where engineering asked me to interpret customer requirements? Declined. The Sunday evening prep work I did to make Monday meetings run smoothly? Deleted from my routine entirely. Then I turned off Slack notifications outside business hours. The little green dot that had burned next to my name for 6 years, signaling my constant availability, finally went dark at 5:01 p.m. Then I wrote a very polite email to 3 department heads, letting them know that going forward, they should refer to the operations manual I'd written last year for any procedural questions. The manual I'd compiled over 6 months of late nights, documenting every process, every workaround, every institutional quirk that made Twilight Technologies function. The manual that had received exactly 14 total views according to the shared drive analytics, most of them probably accidental clicks. The manual nobody had bothered to read because it was easier to just ask me. I also updated my Slack status, available for questions 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. For urgent operational matters, please reference the operations manual, link in bio, or contact your department lead. It felt like setting down a weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it wasn't part of my skeleton. By Tuesday morning, the first cracks appeared. My inbox filled with increasingly frantic messages. Maria, can you walk me through the supplier escalation process? Maria, the dashboard isn't updating and Kyle doesn't know how to fix it. Maria, client is furious about delayed specs, need your help ASAP. I responded to each one with the same cheerful professionalism. Please refer to section 4.2 of the operations manual, available on the shared drive. Happy to clarify if you have questions after reviewing the documentation. Most of them didn't bother reading it. Instead, they tried different angles. The manual is really long, could you just give me the quick version? I'm in a meeting in 5 minutes, don't have time to read through all that. Come on, Maria, this is urgent. I held firm. The quick version is in the executive summary at the beginning of each section. Should only take 2 minutes to read. Radio silence. Then, predictably, complaints to management about my unhelpful new attitude. By Tuesday afternoon, Kyle Brenner appeared at my desk, laptop in hand, looking slightly harried. His tie was loosened, and he had the glazed expression of someone who'd just discovered that competence doesn't substitute for competence. Hey, so, quick question about the production scheduling tool. Is this related to the operations review? I asked, fingers still on my keyboard, not looking up. Sort of? It's more about how we track capacity against client commitments, and there's this field that keeps showing an error message. I'm coordinating materials for the review, but technical troubleshooting falls outside my current scope. I gave him my warmest smile, the one I'd perfected for difficult clients. Have you checked with the IT infrastructure team? His expression shifted through confusion, irritation, then landed on entitled frustration. I thought you were supposed to help with transition? I am. I've documented all processes thoroughly. Everything you need is in the shared folder I sent you last week. I gestured to my screen, where his name appeared in the sharing permissions. You have full access. There are even video walkthroughs for the more complex procedures. I don't have time to watch hours of videos and read through hundreds of pages. The videos are timestamped by topic. Most are under 10 minutes. The documentation is searchable. And I built a quick reference index specifically for time-sensitive scenarios. I kept my tone helpful, even sympathetic. I understand it seems like a lot, but that's actually 6 years of accumulated knowledge. It took me 6 years to learn it too. The documentation just makes it faster for you. He stared at me like I'd suggested he solve a calculus problem using only his forehead. This is ridiculous. When Diane said you'd support the transition, I assumed that I'd keep doing the job while you took credit for it? The words came out before I could stop them, but I didn't regret them. I'm supporting the transition by ensuring all knowledge is documented and accessible. That's what professional transitions look like. What did you think it meant? He left. I heard him complaining to someone in the hallway about unhelpful attitudes and not being a team player. The irony of a man who'd been handed an unearned opportunity lecturing me about teamwork wasn't lost on me. Tuesday evening brought an unexpected visitor. Yuki Tanaka, one of the senior engineers I'd worked closely with for 4 years, appeared with 2 coffees and a carefully neutral expression. "So," she said, setting 1 cup on my desk. "The rumor mill says you've gone rogue. The rumor mill says I'm doing my actual job instead of everyone else's jobs simultaneously. Fair distinction." She settled into the chair across from me, lowering her voice. "For what it's worth, I read your manual when you first published it. It's brilliant. Saved me at least a dozen panicked calls to you." "You're one of the 14 documented readers," I said. "Thank you for actually engaging with it. Most people won't, you know. They're too lazy, or they think their time is too valuable, or they've just gotten used to you being their safety net." She sipped her coffee. "This is going to get ugly before it gets better." "I know. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about it. I'm more prepared for ugly than I am for another 6 years of invisible labor. At least ugly means things are changing. Yuki nodded slowly. "Well, if you need someone to corroborate that you've been doing 3 people's jobs for years, I'm happy to provide that testimony. Preferably in writing, to HR, with receipts. I might take you up on that." She stood to leave, then paused. "Maria? I'm proud of you. I know that's weird to say, but I've watched you burn yourself out making this place function while people like Kyle fail upward. It's about time someone forced the system to acknowledge reality." After she left, I sat in the darkening office and felt something I hadn't felt in years: solidarity. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't difficult. I was just done. Wednesday brought a different flavor of chaos. The automated alert system I'd been manually monitoring, because nobody had ever properly configured it after the last IT contractor left, started sending false positives to the entire leadership team. Every 15 minutes, executives received urgent notifications about system failures that weren't actually happening. Their inboxes exploded. My Slack blew up with increasingly frantic messages. "Maria, can you fix this? Maria, how do we turn this off? Maria, this is unacceptable." I responded with the same calm professionalism. "The alert system configuration instructions are in the operations manual, section 8.3. IT infrastructure should have admin access to adjust thresholds. I can schedule time next week to walk someone through the process if needed." Next week. Not right now. Not dropping everything to fix a problem that never should have been mine in the first place. One of our major clients, Phoenix Industries, threatened to pull their contract because nobody had responded to their specification change request within the 48-hour window stipulated in our SLA. Usually I would have caught it, triaged it, and routed it before anyone even noticed. But specification management lived in the client services department according to the org chart. I'd been covering for chronic understaffing there for 2 years, purely out of professional courtesy. Not anymore. The client services director, Monica Caldwell, cornered me in the break room. "Phoenix is threatening to walk. You knew about their spec change." I saw the email, I confirmed, pouring coffee with steady hands. "I forwarded it to your team with a note about the SLA timeline. You forwarded it at 4:30 p.m. on Friday. Nobody saw it until Monday morning. I forwarded it during business hours before the weekend. What your team does with their inbox management isn't my responsibility." I met her eyes. "Monica, I've been covering spec review for your department for 2 years. For free. While you've been understaffed, I've been doing my job plus significant portions of yours. That's not sustainable, and it's not actually helping you. It just lets leadership ignore that client services needs 3 more people." Her face reddened. "So you're just going to let a major client walk to make some kind of point?" "I'm going to do my job, which doesn't include client specification management. You're going to do yours, which does. And maybe, finally, leadership will resource your department appropriately. Everyone wins. Eventually. A critical production meeting got double booked because I wasn't managing the calendar anymore. 2 VPs showed up at the same conference room at the same time, both expecting to lead crucial discussions. The resulting confusion burned 45 minutes of senior leadership time as they scrambled to relocate and reschedule. I heard about it third hand. Apparently, someone had said, "Where's Maria? She never lets this happen." Exactly. By Wednesday evening, my direct supervisor, Ian Carmichael, caught me as I was packing up at exactly 5 p.m. He had the harried look of a middle manager caught between executive dysfunction and operational reality, thinning hair, loosened tie, coffee stain on his shirt cuff. "Maria, we need to talk about the situation with the Phoenix Industries account." I looked up from my bag, genuinely curious. "What situation?" "Their production run is stalled because specifications weren't confirmed." "This is exactly the kind of thing you usually handle." "I usually handle it as a favor," I corrected gently. "Account management actually sits with the client services team." I've been covering for understaffing there, but given my recent scope adjustment, I thought it best to focus on my core responsibilities. Ian's jaw tightened. "You're really going to do this? Now?" "Do what?" "This," he gestured vaguely at me, at my bag, at the clock showing 5:02 p.m. "This petty boundary thing. This quiet quitting bullshit." The term landed like a slap. Quiet quitting. The newest corporate buzzword for expecting people to work exactly as much as they're paid for and calling it insubordination. I felt something cold and clarifying settle in my chest. "I'm doing my job, Ian. The job I was hired to do. The job that's written in my official description. If the company needs someone to manage client specifications, that should probably be a defined role with appropriate compensation. Don't you think? You know it's more complicated than that." "It's actually not. It's very simple. For 6 years, I've been subsidizing this company's structural problems with unpaid labor. I've been the invisible safety net that let everyone else do half their jobs while I did all of mine plus chunks of theirs. And I did it because I thought it mattered, that eventually someone would recognize the value and it would lead somewhere." I shouldered my bag. Then Diane made it crystal clear that all that extra work didn't matter. That I'm not decisive enough, not assertive enough, which is code for not male enough, not connected enough, not willing to pretend confidence is the same as competence. That's not fair. You're right. It's not fair. It's not fair that I've been doing this for 6 years. It's not fair that Kyle Brenner gets opportunities one earned 3 times over. It's not fair that you're standing here calling me petty for having boundaries instead of asking why this company collapses when one person stops working for free. I moved toward the door. "But I'm done prioritizing fairness to Twilight Technologies over fairness to myself." He didn't answer. I left at 5:04 p.m., and for the first time in 6 years, I didn't check my email once that evening. Thursday morning arrived with an apocalyptic email thread. Our primary manufacturing line had gone down overnight. Something about a software update that conflicted with the legacy interface, the same interface I'd been warning about for 18 months. The same one I'd built custom workarounds for because nobody wanted to fund a proper replacement. Kyle had apparently tried to implement a process improvement he'd read about in a consulting white paper, something about streamlining data flows and eliminating redundant checkpoints. In reality, he'd removed the safety buffers I'd carefully constructed to prevent exactly this kind of cascading failure. The manufacturing floor was dead. 3 major production runs were stalled. Phoenix Industries, already furious about the specification delay, now faced a delivery delay that would trigger penalty clauses in their contract. Our second largest client, Apex Logistics, had a trade show in 5 days where they'd planned to demonstrate products we were now unable to deliver. The email thread had 47 replies and counting. Diane's messages grew more clipped and urgent. Kyle's responses became increasingly defensive, full of phrases like unforeseen complications and unavoidable technical difficulties. Ian was clearly in damage control mode, trying to placate executives while figuring out what had actually happened. Nobody had directly emailed me yet. They were still trying to solve it themselves, still believing the system could function without me. At 2:47 p.m., the emergency meeting invitation arrived. I accepted it, closed my laptop, and felt absolutely nothing but that same hollow calm. The conference room was packed when I arrived. Diane Sutherland stood at the head of the table, her polished composure fraying visibly at the edges. Her usually perfect hair showed signs of repeated finger combing, and she'd abandoned her suit jacket somewhere. 2 VPs I'd rarely seen in operational meetings flanked her, Margaret Whitmore, who handled investor relations, and Terrence Park, the CFO. Both looked like they'd been interrupted during more important work and deeply resented it. Kyle Brenner sat hunched in a corner, looking like he wanted to disappear into the wall. His laptop sat closed in front of him, and he avoided eye contact with everyone. Ian was there, along with heads from manufacturing, IT, client services, and supply chain. Monica Caldwell looked like she hadn't slept. The IT director, Franco Moretti, was pale and sweating. Everyone looked at me when I walked in. Not with anger, with hope. Desperate, uncomfortable hope. Maria, Diane said, voice tight and controlled in a way that suggested she was barely holding on to that control. Thank you for joining us. We have a situation. So I gathered. The production system is completely down. We have 3 major clients waiting on deliveries, and we're looking at breach of contract penalties totaling approximately $2.3 million if we don't resolve this in the next 12 hours. She paused, and I could see it cost her something to say the next words. Kyle mentioned you might have insight into the system architecture. Might have insight. As if I hadn't designed half the workflows myself. As if my fingerprints weren't on every functional aspect of their operations. I have some familiarity with it, I said carefully, keeping my expression neutral. We need you to fix this. I didn't respond immediately. I let the silence stretch, watched the room's anxiety ratchet up another notch. Diane's jaw tightened. Margaret checked her watch. Terrence shifted in his seat. Then I said, I'd need to understand the scope of the problem first. What troubleshooting has already been attempted? Kyle cleared his throat, and his voice came out smaller than I'd ever heard it. I tried reverting the update, but the system won't let me access the admin controls. And the documentation doesn't explain. Which documentation? The manual you sent? Did you read Section 7, which specifically covers system rollback procedures and admin authentication? His face reddened. I skimmed it, but there was a lot of technical detail, and I thought I could just figure it out? I kept my tone curious, not accusatory. The technical detail exists because the system is technical. Those aren't decorative words. Each procedure is documented that way because missing a step can cause exactly what we're experiencing now. Franco jumped in, clearly trying to deflect blame from Kyle. Maria, even I couldn't get in. The authentication system locked us out after 3 failed attempts. That's by design, I said. After the security breach 3 years ago, we implemented multi-factor authentication and automatic lockouts precisely to prevent unauthorized system changes. I turned to Diane. The rollback requires 2-factor authorization from both the operations lead and the IT security lead. It's a safety feature, not a bug. The documentation Kyle skimmed explains that in Section 7.2, with step-by-step instructions including screenshots. Margaret leaned forward. Can you execute the rollback? Technically, yes. I still have system access and security clearance. Then let's. However, I continued, and the word hung in the air like a blade, I need to be clear about something. The role I currently hold, Senior Operations Coordinator, doesn't include system administration or crisis management. Those have been responsibilities I've taken on voluntarily, outside my job description, typically during unpaid overtime hours. The room went very quiet. I could hear the air conditioning, someone's phone buzzing on silent, the distant sound of normal office life continuing outside this conference room. What are you saying? Diane's voice had gone sharp, defensive. I'm saying I'm happy to help resolve this crisis. But I think we need to have an honest conversation first about what my actual role is here versus what the company has been depending on me to do. We don't have time for. With respect, Diane, we have 12 hours. We have time for this conversation. I kept my voice level, almost gentle, which somehow made the words land harder. Because here's the situation, this crisis happened because the company has been running on institutional knowledge that exists in exactly one person's head. Mine. No backup, no redundancy, no formal role definition. Kyle couldn't fix this not because he's incompetent, but because he was dropped into a system with no proper documentation, no training, and no acknowledgement that he was being asked to replace someone who'd been doing 3 jobs simultaneously. I looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes. If we fix this crisis right now the exact same way we fixed every other crisis, by having me work miracles and then going back to normal, we'll be right back here in 3 months. 6 months. Next year. The system is broken, and I'm tired of being the only thing holding it together. So what do you want? Terrence asked, and I appreciated that he cut straight to the transactional heart of it. It was the right question. Finally. I want my actual job to match what I actually do, I said. Director of Operations Infrastructure. Real authority over system design, process improvement, and knowledge management. A team budget to build redundancy so no single person is a point of failure. And I wanted in writing that strategic decisions about operational systems require input from operations, not just executive decree. Diane started, and I could see the refusal forming. That's the offer, I finished. Alternative option, I walk you through the immediate fix as a professional courtesy. Kyle or whoever else you designate takes notes and handles it going forward. And I continue in my current role doing exactly what my job description says, nothing more. Your choice. I could see Diane calculating, pride warring with pragmatism and a $2.3 million penalty. The VPs were exchanging glances, having some silent conversation in the language of executives. Finally, Margaret spoke. The director role would need board approval. Then get it. It could take weeks. Then we do the interim plan. I fix this crisis, train Kyle properly, and you formalize the role when you can. But I need commitment now that we're actually solving the systemic problem, not just putting another band-aid on it. Margaret looked at Diane. Diane's jaw was so tight I thought she might crack a tooth, but she nodded once, sharp and bitter. Fine. We'll formalize it. Excellent. I stood. Kyle, grab your laptop. We're going to the server room. Everyone else, I'll send status updates every 2 hours. The fix took 4 hours. Not because it was complicated, but because I made Kyle document every single step. We sat in the climate-controlled server room, surrounded by humming equipment and blinking lights, and I walked him through the architecture like a professor conducting a seminar. Why did they set it up this way? He asked at one point, staring at a particularly convoluted authentication chain. Because 3 years ago, we had a security breach and everyone panicked. This was the quick fix. I recommended a proper architecture overhaul, but it got deprioritized because it wasn't customer-facing. I guided him through the rollback sequence, making him type each command himself while I watched. This is why documentation matters. And why you can't just change things without understanding dependencies. Every shortcut in this system exists for a reason, usually a painful one. I'm sorry, he said quietly. About everything. I knew this was your project originally. I should have pushed back when Diane offered me the role. You didn't know what you didn't know, I said. And honestly? You got used. They wanted someone they could control, someone who wouldn't push back on bad decisions because you were too inexperienced to know they were bad decisions. That's not your fault. He glanced at me, and I saw something like relief in his expression. For what it's worth, I don't think you're indecisive. I think you think things through. That's not a weakness. I appreciate that. We worked in companionable silence for a while. I showed him the monitoring dashboards, explained the alert hierarchies, walked him through the disaster recovery protocols that had never been properly implemented. He asked good questions. He took detailed notes. He was actually a fast learner when someone took the time to explain things properly instead of expecting him to intuit 6 years of institutional knowledge through osmosis. Can I ask you something? He said around hour 3. Sure. Why did you stay so long? If you were doing all this and not getting recognized for it? I thought about that. Same reason anyone stays in a bad situation. Hope that it would change. Fear that leaving meant wasting the time I'd already invested. Pride in being the person who could handle it. And honestly? I didn't realize how bad it was until someone made it impossible to ignore. Diane. Diane, I confirmed. Sometimes you need someone to show you exactly how little they value you before you can value yourself enough to set boundaries. By 10 p.m., production was back online. By 11 p.m., I'd sent recovery plans to all affected clients, working with Monica to craft messages that acknowledged the delay without over-explaining our internal dysfunction. By midnight, I was home, exhausted but strangely energized in a way I hadn't felt in years. The formal offer came 2 weeks later. Director of Operations Infrastructure. 28% pay increase. Team budget for 3 new hires. Seat at the strategic planning table. And large office with actual windows.